It's always a great feeling when you get to be proud of your team, fly their flag in your window, slap that decal on your car, wear your jerseys with pride. So it really stings after a season like this one, where so many teams experienced heartbreaking losses, organizational dysfunction, and general disregard for humanity that makes you want to tuck away the jersey for another day. Being an NFL fan isn't as easy as it seems. At a glance, it may look like a crew of friends slothing around, drinking beer, and snacking on the couch all day while they watch football. But for many NFL fans, their allegiance to their team runs way deeper than just that. So much so that when a team is struggling, it has a tangible impact on the diehard fan's life. And needless to say, there are quite a few fan bases out there right now who don't have much to feel good about when it comes to their favorite team. In fact, there are a number of cities that ought to be downright embarrassed at the state of their NFL franchise. And today, we're covering 10 of them. I think that an obvious place to start here is in the heartland of America, Indianapolis, where Colts fans simply have to be sick over the untimely demise that their team met this year at the hands of the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars. For anyone who is living under a rock this winter, the Colts were at one point very much in the driver's seat in the AFC wildcard race. After a 6-6 start, the team went on a little run, throttling the lowly Houston Texans, then delivering 2 consecutive wins over eventual playoff teams in New England and Arizona. The hype was starting to build in Indy. Jonathan Taylor had emerged as a bona fide superstar at running back. The Indianapolis defense was flying all over the field, making plays. And even Carson Wentz showed some flashes of the 2017 NFL MVP candidate we all thought was going to run the league for the next decade back then. I mean, after that big-time throw he made against the Cardinals, who, by the way, also ended up being frauds, everyone and their mother was anointing the Colts as a legitimate contender in the AFC. Essentially, all they had to do was win one of their last 2 games of the season. Which, considering they're playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who had quite possibly the most tumultuous season in NFL history, and the Jaguars, who, well, are the Jaguars, it seemed like a postseason berth was a foregone conclusion for the Colts. The first sign of trouble, though, came when Indianapolis lost to the Raiders in Week 17, dropping a tightly contested contest 20-23. In fairness to the Colts, the Raiders were fighting for a playoff berth of their own. The Colts fought hard, but unfortunately for their loyal fan base, that just wasn't enough as they were edged out by a Daniel Carlson game-winning field goal as time expired. But considering that they had the Jaguars slated the following week, panic didn't really set in just yet. But man, it should have, because the Colts laid an absolute egg against one of the worst teams we've seen in recent memory. Carson Wentz imploded, turning the ball over twice as the Colts were manhandled by Jacksonville 26-11. This was sort of like what we saw play out with the Los Angeles Chargers, whose fans have plenty of reason to be embarrassed in their own right. I mean, LA has one of the league's most talented quarterbacks in Justin Herbert. And yet, they absolutely squandered a postseason berth too, also dropping a win and in game against the Raiders. At least that was a bit of a shootout though, and it wasn't against the Jaguars. And at least the Chargers haven't continued to compound the situation in the same way that the Colts have. Because if blowing a chance at the playoffs wasn't bad enough, now the Colts' loudmouth owner, Jim Irsay, has taken to Twitter to bash the team that he and his posse assembled. You can see clear as day in the final 8 NFL team playoffs, you need a QB and offense who can score 30 or more in regulation, Irsay tweeted, and a defense that can hold an opponent under 30. I imagine Colts fans as the Homer Simpson meme backing slowly into the bushes as the end of this season played out, wondering why in the world they ever got their hopes up. One of the Colts' divisional rivals, the Tennessee Titans, has also done well to embarrass their fans in recent months. To their credit, at least they made the playoffs, as the 1 seed in a year that only one team got a bye to the divisional round no less. But man, did it get ugly. The number 1 seed Titans trotted out onto their home field against the Cincinnati Bengals, who had just won their first playoff game in over 30 years. And they took a page out of their divisional neighbors' playbook and laid an egg. It started off ugly, with Ryan Tannehill throwing a terrible interception on the first play of the game. And to be honest, it really didn't get much better from there. particularly on the offensive side of the ball. They were determined to keep force-feeding Derrick Henry the ball despite the fact that he clearly looked to still be hampered by that foot injury that cost him half the season. And the offense continually put a defensive unit that played really well in terrible situations. All of this culminated in a shocking 19-16 loss to the upstart Bengals. The Titans did well to prove all of the haters that suggested they might be the worst #1 seed in NFL playoff history right. Speaking of 1 seeds that left their fan bases hanging out to dry this postseason, how about Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers? Because man, are the cheeseheads reeling right now. Where do we start? With the Packers scoring just 10 points in a playoff game, despite having one of the better offenses in the league this year, with the reigning league MVP at quarterback, or with the incompetent special teams unit that plagued them all season rearing its ugly head at the worst possible time, all culminating in losing to Jimmy G and the 49ers at home coming off the bye. It really doesn't get much worse than that. And when you factor in this media spectacle that the team became in the aftermath of Rodgers' immunization scandal, there are more than a few Packers fans hanging their heads in shame at what their proud franchise has become. The future really isn't much brighter either. Rodgers' future with the team seems murky at best, and it looks like Green Bay might be facing a true rebuild. Oof. Save the COVID-related media circus, what we're seeing play out in Green Bay is actually fairly similar to the embarrassment that the fans of America's team are experiencing. The Dallas Cowboys were one of, if not the most hyped teams in the league all year long. And for once, it didn't feel like it was just a product of them being the Cowboys. They had all the weapons imaginable on offense, budding young superstars on the defensive side of the ball, and, of course, a star quarterback in Dak Prescott ready to lead them to the promised land. Unfortunately for Cowboys fans, the Niners defeated them at home during wildcard weekend, in a rather embarrassing fashion nonetheless, with Dallas running a quarterback draw with 13 seconds left while trying to orchestrate a comeback only to have time expire before they could spike the ball to stop the clock. And of course, that opened up the door for Twitter, and the Cowboys' #1 hater, Stephen A. Smith, to pour on the embarrassment and relish in Dallas's defeat. With all the young talent that the Cowboys have, there is a reason to be excited about the future in Big D. But man, is it gonna be a long offseason for the fan base. Alright, let's jump back to the AFC South, because now that I think about it, there's actually enough embarrassment to go around for all the fan bases in that division. In fact, we really just hit the tip of the iceberg there. Because while the Titans and Colts disappointed in heartbreaking fashion, both the Jaguars and Texans take humiliating their fans to an entirely different stratosphere. That win against the Colts and the stunner against the Bills in the beginning of November were really the only bright spots in an otherwise disastrous season down in Jacksonville. The Urban Meyer experiment quite literally could not have gone any worse. Whether it was the bizarre leaks coming out of the facility of the various ways he was ostracized, berating, and belittling his assistant coaches and players, or his extracurriculars in Ohio after an embarrassing loss, Myers always found a way to keep his and his team's name in the news for all the wrong reasons. Not to mention the fact that he and the Jaguars essentially wasted first overall pick Trevor Lawrence's rookie season. The best Jags fans can hope for at this point is that a new coaching staff will right the ship. Although, knowing Shad Khan's track record, there really isn't much reason for anyone to believe he'll make a good hire. He's probably too busy running his second-rate pro wrestling company to take his Jaguars' responsibilities seriously. And the Texans. Oh, don't get me started on the Texans. Between what they did to David Coley and the wonky state of affairs surrounding their star quarterback Deshaun Watson, it might be an even sadder state of affairs than what's going on in Jacksonville. I mean, Houston finally got a franchise quarterback, one that they're paying nearly $75 million in guaranteed money, and now because of his poor decision-making off the field and the murky details surrounding his legal status, they're paying him to stay home. To make matters worse, if they do decide to part ways with him, which at this point it seems like they just have to, they're probably going to get pennies on the dollar for him. And believe it or not, that's the best case scenario. There's a chance that he continues living on in purgatory in Houston, cashing checks, yet still required to stay away from all team activities. The entire organization right now is in utter embarrassment, especially with Jack Easterby at the helm. The man has made misstep after misstep since joining Houston, and seems to now have unilateral backing from ownership. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the man, myth, and legend that is Easterby, he was reportedly the mastermind behind the decision to trade away DeAndre Hopkins. And if that isn't enough to sow distrust in the man's decision-making ability, how about the reports that he was responsible for the team holding secret workouts at the strength coach's house when the NFL had ordered franchises to shut down all operations due to COVID-19, which, shocker, led to an outbreak. Or the rumors that multiple Texans staffers and players believed that Easterby had been running surveillance on them outside of the team facilities. Yeah, I'm sorry, Texans fans, your team is screwed. And the embarrassment you feel watching it continue to unfold, well, that's just collateral damage. The Texans haven't exactly been the pinnacle of success since entering the NFL, but it sure seems like they are reaching new lows. Like what we've seen from two once proud organizations, the New York Giants and Chicago Bears. Starting with the former, the Giants just seem determined to make life for their fans completely unbearable. It all started back with the infamous boat picture, and ever since, it's just spiraled out of control. So much so that they have almost entirely stolen the Jets' thunder, at least when it comes to being the laughingstock of the state, and really the league. All you really need to know about the state of the Giants' affairs is the QB sneak that they ran on 3rd and 9 to cap off an abysmal 4-13 season. The rotten cherry on a humiliating year. And it isn't much better in Chicago either. You know it's bad when literally the only thing that fans are happy about is that the team's head coach and GM were finally fired. And to make matters worse, they can't even fully celebrate the fact that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace are now out of power because they have to worry about a new head coach and regime not fully embracing Justin Fields, who the team invested the 11th overall pick in last year, which is exactly what they lived through just a few years ago when the team drafted Mitch Trubisky number 2 overall in 2017, only to bring in Nagy, who had no interest in building an offense around Mitch. How these teams haven't figured out the risks of drafting a QB, then immediately changing regimes the next year is beyond me. Last but not least, we would be remiss not to include the Miami Dolphins, who, to their credit, found a rather innovative way to make their fans cringe by firing head coach Brian Flores, who has presided over the first back-to-back winning seasons in Miami since Dave Wannstedt back in 2003. Talk about a tough look. Your team finally looks like it's starting to build something, and then seemingly out of nowhere, you can the head coach, and then the entire internet proceeds to mock your decision for weeks. Tough time to be a Dolphins fan if you ask me. But what NFL fan base do you think should be the most embarrassed right now? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.